Welcome to the ILC 130, Society, Technology, and Change. On this, my first lecture attempt, I'll be dealing with the society part of Goodies. Jim Croft, my buddy, friend, and colleague, will be in for the next presentation, and he'll be doing some things with technology with you. We're going to start out with some definitions of society, and I want you to always remember that you can take any of the concepts that I deal with in terms of these videos and put those concepts into the Bing box or the Google box and typically come up with all kinds of information beyond what it is that I will have spoken at. So if you have questions on a definition or something, okay, you can always easily go and find more information on this. There is an encyclopedia of sociology out there that's free. Some of the concepts will take you to other universities, and they have really large libraries, and that most of that material will automatically come up through any kind of an internet connection. For today, we're going to talk about sociology. Some definitions of that and some definitions of other terms. We're going to talk about tools of the trade. And by that, I mean the kinds of tools that I would use. Well, I managed to get that way forward. I'm not quite sure how. Let's back all that up. Let's try that again. In terms of the definition that I use is this one. Is the scientific study of pattern social interaction, its antecedents and its consequences. And I want you to look at three of the components of that are most important. First of all is the concept of pattern. Okay, what sociology looks for and what I would hope that you look for in terms of this class are patterns. Okay, patterns in three different areas: patterns in society, patterns in technology, and patterns of change. Okay. I put up a piece of cloth, okay, to kind of represent that concept of pattern. Okay, think of the warp and waft in terms of the cloth, and the different kinds of patterns that you can see. If you break it into different parts, you can see. Sometimes you concentrate on the up-downs, and sometimes you concentrate on the acrosses, and sometimes you concentrate on the little stripes, and sometimes you could concentrate on the big stripes, and all those would be different patterns. And you look at the piece of cloth. This is a tartan. My heritage happens to be Scottish, so tartans are something that are important to me. You can see recurring kinds of patterns. Okay, in this one you have the recurring pattern of 4 from down in the 2 large blocks, left and right. In almost all of your academic work, even if you haven't been given a definition like this one, what you're searching for is pattern. Second concept in terms of the definition is social interaction. Social interaction is something that's occurring now. Even though I'm not there with you, I'm influencing your behavior, at least subtly, by having put together a particular set of materials in terms of the videos. Okay, the video, okay, any time that the behavior of one influences the behavior of another, we can call that social interaction. Okay. Typically, we're dealing with that in face-to-face situations, but it doesn't necessarily have to be so. Antecedents are things that come before and sometimes are thought to cause. Okay, lots of times we're going to look at antecedents in terms of this class and not be actually know for sure if they're the absolute causes, or we'll be looking at technology that's occurring now, and we won't know for sure if that's going to be an important antecedent for what will happen in the future. But we'll ask those questions, and we'll ask you to ask those questions as well. And the last part of it is the consequences. That's going to be kind of the outcome of the particular sequence. Often in terms of the writings that we will have you do in terms of the class, is we'll ask you to, here's a set of data, and in a first draw 3 or 4 bulleted conclusions, and then write a paragraph, okay, that discusses what it is that you have concluded from that data. Okay? In that kind of sense, the conclusions that you draw are the consequences of the data that you're looking at. most important tools of the trade in terms of sociology, in the largest sense, is the concept of observation. Okay, and you'll hear me talk in class sometimes about different kinds of glasses, and I'll kind of do my glasses analogy here on this day. Sometimes what we need to use for observation is binoculars. Okay, and so we'll do our observations from a relatively long distance away. One of the observations that I once did was at a small school district, and they asked me to come out and to try to help them understand the bullying that was happening in terms of their school. And this was 15 years ago now, and bullying's become quite a topic since then. So this little school district was a little bit ahead of that game. Okay. And often I had to do my observations from long distances, because if I entered into the situation, then the outcomes between the students themselves changed. Okay. So I had to use binoculars. Okay. Other times, if you're doing a series of observations in a chem lab, for example, it's much more likely that you're going to be doing observations that are through a microscope. Okay, but both of those are still sets of observations. Okay. Some of the other kinds of observations that we do in terms of the social world is that we use a microscope. Okay, in terms of dealing with the micro level, what's going on between 2 or 3 participants, okay, or in a very small group. And at another time, from our binoculars, we'll be dealing with what's going on at the macro level. Okay, but we have both microscopes. Okay. Okay. I just tried to put up a couple of tools. There's a wrench and there's a clamp. Okay, just like you have tools as a carpenter, or tools as a laborer, or tools as a boilermaker, you have tools as a social scientist. Okay? And the most important tool that I want you to walk away from today with is that we want you to look, okay, to see, to go out and to observe, and to look at the world a little bit differently maybe than you have before. As you learn some of the language that we'll be presenting, it'll allow you to look at the world somewhat differently. Another kind of observation that you can do, and that's very common, okay, that we'll be doing a fair bit of in this class because of the nature of it, where we'll be presenting information on video, but we'll also have you guys exploring information that's available vis-a-vis the internet and other kinds of sources, is that you'll end up using existing data. Okay. Later on in our course, we'll talk about the Rokeach value scale as an extension of culture, and we'll actually have an assignment that surrounds the existing data that Jim Croft and I have collected in our on-campus classes for this very class. So we'll have a set of data for you to work with, and then have you draw conclusions from, work with that data, and do some writing and concluding from that. We'll also have you build some hypotheses, okay, from that. Okay. What's the difference between a hypothesis and a conclusion anyway? Well, hypothesis usually is stated in an if blank then blank format. Okay. If there are lots of people in the situation and I'm the only one who's voting no and everybody else is voting yes, then it's more likely that I will change my opinion. Okay. So if there's that sense of unanimity, okay, so that would be if blank then blank. Conclusions usually aren't anywhere nearly as often written in an if blank then blank. It's just much more likely to be a statement or a sentence that said, okay, the data clearly indicate that males are twice as likely as females to whatever. Okay. Now, hidden inside of that conclusion is a hypothesis. Could you easily turn to that if male then high scores, if female then low scores, if that's what it said, and then could you go out and test that in the real world? And one place that we do that kind of testing is with existing data. One of the data sources that we'll also expose you to is going to be census data. Okay, you'll go out on the internet, gather some of it, get some of that, and then use it. If you were taking a research methods class, a bit more advanced than we are here, or if you were working for an agency, or if you were working for a political campaign, it's quite likely that you would use questionnaires. Okay? And what a questionnaire does is that you ask whatever it is that you're going to ask on paper. That's what a questionnaire is. And there's all kinds of different questionnaires, different kinds of scales that can be involved in them, different kinds of questions. But the core is the idea that the questionnaire is a set of questions that is asked, okay, on paper. You also have the ability to ask in terms of an interview. Interview involves face-to-face interaction, okay, or it could be over the phone or over the internet. Okay. Classically, interviews were done face-to-face. A difficulty with face-to-face interviews is that the interviewer has a real high probability of influencing what it is that the interviewee is going to say, simply by their presence in a given situation. That's one reason that phone and internet are used, and phone and internet are also used because they allow us to get at a large number of people or at a very select group of people and do that relatively quickly and inexpensively. Interviews and questionnaires can be done at either the individual or the group level. Remember that the little guy in the center of the screen, you'll see him looking out there with this kind of monoscope. That the most important thing for this class for you guys is that we want you to observe. We want you to be an observer of existing data and an observer of your world as well. In terms of this course, we're only going to deal with some basic statistics. For some students, when statistics get mentioned, they get really kind of squirrely. Okay. The ones that you guys are going to have to worry about, first of all, is going to be counts. Okay. So that you would count up, the, for example, the number of males or the number of females on a given phenomenon. Okay. Most of you are familiar with percentages. Okay, and all the percentages is you have a count and you know how many there is all together, and then you begin to break it down. A little bit more advanced than that are three terms that you will see over and over as you read literature on statistics. The first is the concept of mean. Mean is the arithmetic average. You take all the scores and divide by the number of scores. Okay, mean is the average. You have to do some math on it. Okay. The median, in contrast, you have to have a list of all the scores. You arrange the scores from highest to lowest or lowest to highest, okay, and the median score is the one that is physically in the middle of the list. So if you had 5 scores, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, 3 is right in the middle of that, so that would be the median. Okay. The mode, again, you would have a list of scores. It's easiest if you have them from highest to lowest or lowest to highest, and you look for the score that occurs most often. So let me give you an example with again, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, the 2 occurs most often in that list of scores, and that equals the mode. Now there are different situations that the mode, the median, or the mean are used. Mostly you won't see the mode used very often. Okay, you're much more likely to see the mean. Okay, but periodically you will also see the median. Okay, when we get into income kind of data, the median is most often used because one really high salary or one really low salary can skew, okay, move the average in terms of when you do the arithmetic. So the median may be a better indicator. You also have a concept of range, and you're less likely to see this, but I think it's a number that if you were reporting numbers, like say you were doing some work for an agency and you had gathered information for them, but I think that you want to report the range of scores as well. And the range of scores it would be stated like this. Okay, the average score, the mean score for students in ILC 130 for this semester on their midterm was a 72. With a range of scores from 99 to 34. Okay, is what a range of scores from 99 to 34 means is the highest score was a 99 and the lowest score was a 34. So that says, okay, where does the mean live within the top score and the bottom score? Okay, most of you are used to reading charts and have done some chart work. When we get a little further on in the class, we'll have you work with some data where you're actually we'll see some charts and build some charts. Okay, there's all kinds of chart kind of material out there on the internet. Mostly you're not going to have to do very much from those. You won't have to build any advanced or fancy ones. Okay, you will simply need to be able to read them and let us know what that is. Probably the statistic that I use the most often is a proportion, okay, where I say something like, 2 out of 3 of the students did X, Y, or Z, or 9 out of 10. Okay. That can easily be converted into a percentage, but I often talk in proportions, and so do a large number of other researchers. Okay. So it gives you, somehow it makes it almost more solid when you say 2 out of 3 students rather than 66%, okay, of students. Percentage, most of you are familiar with. You know how to compute those. You'll see them over and over and over in terms of materials that you read. You're not going to have to do a whole lot of percentage work in here. That's probably the most difficult of the math that you'd have to do, and figuring out a percentage isn't particularly difficult. Higher level statistics, they won't occur in terms of this class. There are all kinds of other statistics that could be put in. Okay, I don't find them useful for students at the level that you guys are at. If you have further training in statistics, that's great. If you want to include more statistical analysis in anything that you do for Jim and I in this class, that's great too. Okay, but for those of you that may have a tiny touch of math phobia, don't worry, you're not going to have to do any kinds of higher level stats for us in this class. Okay. Probably, if I have to say, the first and maybe the most important core concept for this whole course for me that I want to make sure that you guys walk away with, it's going to be the concept of life arena or social institution. Okay, I use the word arena because students tend to be able to understand the concept arena. Like, think of a bullfight arena. Okay, if you're a toreador, man, you have an important component of your life occurs inside of that arena. The arenas that I'm going to be talking about are usually spoken of in terms of the material you read as social institutions. Okay, I will use the word arena over and over and over, however. Each arena has a set of rules that define roles, expectations, obligations, and a hierarchy or status system. Okay, each arena has rules. Okay, later we'll talk about those rules as different kinds. For example, we'll talk about norms as being of 2 kinds, mores and folkways. So that's just fancy language for rules. Okay. The rules define roles. Roles tell us how we're supposed to act. I suspect that most of you anticipated that I, as a professor, in my role in the arena of, for me, the economy, and for you guys, the institution of higher education, I would come in prepared to talk to you about society, since that's supposed to be my role in terms of this class. Okay. Most of you, going to the next word, had an expectation that I probably wouldn't talk most of the lecture time on the price of wool in Afghanistan, because that doesn't have very much to do with what society is about. Okay. The expectations that you hold, or the expectations that other inside of the arena of the university, become my obligations. I'm obliged or obligated to come prepared, okay, answer questions, prepare tests, do all those kinds of things in my role within the arena of higher education. My role is that of professor. The role of student, okay, are there expectations that I have of you? Well, go into the materials and pull out the syllabus, and you'll find right away that I have several expectations of you. Okay, are you relatively obliged, okay, to meet those expectations? The answer is yeah. I mean, in the end, there's no gun to your head, okay, but there would be consequences for most of you if in fact you don't. And the last part of it is a hierarchy or a status system. We'll talk about stratification. We'll spend much more time on stratification in the latter videos for the class. But every arena, in all of life, there's always a hierarchy and status system. There's always stratification within that. So one of the questions I want you to learn in terms of an observer that you could ask as a neophyte sociologist, a neophyte studier of the world, okay, is to say, what are the rules that are going on here? What arena is the action happening in? What are the roles that the people are playing? What are the expectations and obligations that inform those roles? Okay, and what's the hierarchy or the status system that's going on there? Okay, if you do that, you've done a basic analysis of the social situation that you're observing. Okay, whether you're observing it through binoculars or whether you're observing it up close and personal. Okay. Now, a question becomes, as technology changes, do the roles that people play in the individual life arenas, do they change? Okay. Think about what you're seeing right now. Here I am appearing on camera with a set of PowerPoints that periodically still surprise me and where I don't get my fingers quite on the right spots, okay? And so that all of a sudden a whole bunch of stuff goes by. Okay? But does that technology change at least the nature somewhat of the role that I play in terms of the course instructor? And the answer is for sure. Do you have a set of expectations vis-a-vis technology? And lots of students have really high expectations in terms of professors in technology. Does it become obligatory on the part of the university to have at least some level of technology? Okay. And does the status system within a given life arena change based on technology availability? Okay. Let's think of yourselves. For many of you, you're probably high-tech people, and we'll deal later with that as the concept of the Lexus. Okay. The fast-moving change, modern, technological innovations, etc. Does your status go up when you have certain kinds of status symbols within the technological world? Okay, are there certain cell phones that give you more status than others? Are there certain cars that give you more status than others? And you say, why did he throw in cars? Well, a car is technology too. Okay, could you have different kinds of bows and arrows and have different status levels? Okay, how about different kinds of military hardware? All those are technological components, and all of them are involved with status systems. Okay, one of the social arenas that you are probably most familiar with is going to be the family, and I'll spend some time giving you some of the basic concepts of that today, simply because that's an easy one to start with, because most of you have a bit of a picture of it. We'll also deal in a later tape or a later video with the political system, and that's the one that I found that students often struggle with the most. Okay, the military is a part of the political system. Okay, now think of the military. Are there a particular set of rules that define roles? Are there expectations and obligations? And is there a hierarchy and status system within the military? Just think of the ranks that people have. There's your status system. If I'm of one rank, am I supposed to act towards another individual of a higher rank or of a lower rank in a particular kind of way? Am I obligated to do that, in fact, by the organization that I'm a part of? Okay. We also have religious institutions, and I won't spend a great deal of time on that in terms of examples for the class, okay, but it's relatively easy for you to take that. Think of the Catholic Church as a religious organization. Is there a hierarchy? For example, does the Pope have higher status, okay, than a priest? And the answer is for sure. Okay. In terms of the economic system, we'll spend a fair bit of time on the economic system. We'll deal later with globalization and what globalization means, how the economic systems of the world are coming to be intertwined. Okay. And probably the easiest way to look at that is through the arena of the economic system. Sports and entertainment offer a really interesting part of the life arenas or social institutions, in that sport and entertainment, okay, why do they occur? Well, in terms of why they occur in the mass media, or why people gather together with 60,000 or 90,000 or 110,000 fans, that's an economic event in the eyes of someone. Okay. As I'm making these videos, very soon a group called Notre Dame will be playing another group called Army. Okay, they'll be playing it on TV on a Saturday. Okay, now, do you suppose that either the school Notre Dame or the organization called Army makes any money from Chevrolet or Dodge or Budweiser beer or whoever it is that's doing the advertising to go and do that sport as an entertainment of a given Saturday? Okay. Sport and entertainment is also a really easy way for you to think of an arena. How about we talk about the tennis arena, and the soccer arena, and the football arena, the basketball arena. Okay. Each of those, are there different sets of rules that guide the basketball player versus the football player versus the volleyball player? Okay. Are there different expectations inside of those different roles for a forward, okay, or a guard, or a center, okay, or a left tackle, okay, or the person that does the spiking, okay, or the person that sets it up in volleyball? Okay, I think that sport and entertainment gives you a really easy way, okay, to look at the arena, okay, the concept of arena, and see how it works. Okay, education, that's the formal education, is the one that you and I are involved in right now. A little bit later in this presentation, I'll talk about socialization, okay, and we'll see that education as a social arena, okay, fulfills one of the functions. Okay, one of its functions is to train up folks to get them ready for the economic world, and get them ready for the political world, and in a smaller sense, to get them ready for their future family world. Okay. Remember, there are rules, roles, relationships, expectations, obligations, and a status system in each of those life arenas. Okay, we can put forward a set of, well, I managed to get it all ahead of itself again. I don't know why it does that. I'm going to wipe that out because I want to go back to these other pictures. There we go. I want you to look at the images that I put up there. The cross as an image for the religious institution. Okay. We'll talk a little bit later about part of sociology called symbolic interactionism, and symbolic interactionism lets us know that we respond to symbols, okay, in really important kinds of ways. Look at the member of the military saluting the flag. Think of yourself when you hear the flag and other kinds of patriotic music associated with that. We have certain kinds of outcomes. Down on the far right, we have the dollar sign, and the dollar sign is one of the representations of the economic world. Basketball, I'm using here to represent the sport of basketball. Throwing your hats up in the air in terms of graduation is an educational thing. And the mom, dad, and a child to represent the family. Okay. Now, for some of you, you'll find that you're able to remember concepts better, okay, if you use symbols to if you include symbols with the definitions. So if that's true, take the materials that you have. For example, you'll find that you have, among the course docs available to you, you'll have a variety of course lecture materials and outlines from lectures that you can access electronically and add in anything that you want. Okay, and I really hope that you do. In fact, there's a couple of assignments where you have to, okay, where you're requested, okay, to do that. Go out and get images, okay, and integrate them right into the written words. Okay. I start out here with a lock and chains because in all of the arenas in some ways can set us free, but also the arenas tend to limit what it is that we can do. Okay. For most people, they think of the family as this warm, soft, and fuzzy and great place, okay, that socialization takes place in. Okay. But I wanted to just contrast it, okay, as a place where there are lots of rules, lots of roles, lots of expectations, okay, that can feel pretty heavy. Okay, think of family roles of mother, father, son, and daughter. As son and daughter, or mother, father, do each of those roles. Does the son have expectations of father? Does the son have expectations of mother? You bet. Okay. Other roles, grandparent and grandchild. Do grandchildren have expectations of grandparents, and do grandparents have expectations of grandchild? Is the grandparent a father or a mother, okay, to the father and the mother of the grandchild. So now we're getting into more complex kinds of roles, okay, where there's, and that's how life really is in terms of the family. Okay. How about husband, wife, and mother-in-law and father-in-law? Okay, are those all family roles as well? Okay, often that important to the same degree as mother would be or that father would be. Okay, how about brother and sister? If you have sons and daughters inside the same family, you have brother and sister roles. Are there different kinds of expectations that we have of our sisters? You know, different kind of expectations that we have of our brothers. Okay, could you sit down if you chose to and write down all of your family roles and all the family roles of the other members of your families? Because you may actually have had one that you were born into, and you may have created another one by this point in time. Okay. And then could you just begin to list out the expectations and look at, is there any potential for conflict between those? Sometimes is it really hard to be a good brother and a good son at the same time? How about uncle, cousin, nephew, niece? Okay. You have, or excuse me, I missed aunt, uncle, nephew, niece, and cousin. Okay. Okay. For many of you that are from urban areas, often aunt, uncle, nephew, niece, cousin fall out because you don't really go much beyond a nuclear family, and the nuclear family is mom, dad, and their kids. Okay. If you were a member of a Montana native tribe, okay, aunt, uncle, nephew, niece, cousin would be of equal importance as any of the other roles that you see up above. In fact, out to second cousin for most Native Americans, okay, is a very important family role. You have very specific expectations and obligations that you're supposed to meet, okay, with those different folks. A question that you can always ask when you're asking in terms of family roles is, who owes what to whom? Okay, who is obliged to do what for whom? Okay, who has power in the situation? Okay, does dad have more power than mom? Okay, does father have more power than son? Does aunt, uncle, nephew? Okay, what kind of expectations do nephews and nieces have for their aunts and their cousins? Family roles can never really be disconnected from the economic world. Now think of, okay, if you are a father or a mother, okay, do you have an economic role that you play out there in the world? And the answer is almost for sure yes. The world has changed over the last 150 years. 150 years ago, in terms of families were productive units. They were primary units of production. Okay. Now they are consuming units. Okay. Think of how much it costs to raise a child from birth to the age of 18 or birth to the age of 21. There's all kinds of different figures that float out there. Put it in your Bing box or put it in your Google box and look it up. The amount that it costs to raise a child really is staggering. Okay, when you look at it. Okay, while I talk about family roles as separate from the economic world. Okay, I show there like a dollar, but also a ball and chain on the. Okay, do people get themselves into situations in terms of family roles where they are also tied to the economy to such a degree that it's very hard for them to play productive family roles because they're gone all the time. For most people, they look at family as a big heart and flowers and a sense of romanticism, and that's really a cool part. Okay, but there are really other parts too. Okay. Once we have decided and committed and become and gone through a marriage process, okay, are we connected to the other, okay, at least ostensibly, okay, for life, okay, so that family roles can not only set us free, but family roles can bind us as well. In review, sociologists search for patterns, causes, and consequences. Patterns, causes, and consequences. So a pattern that I was just talking about within the social institution of family or roles. Okay. Do certain kinds of roles, once there, do they become causes? or antecedents of certain other kinds of behaviors? Okay, and does the way that we organize ourselves in terms of a family have particular kinds of consequences? The sociologist searches for patterns, causes, and consequences using the tools of social science, the most important one being observation. In the arenas of life, okay, and I talked today about the arena of family, a tiny bit about political system, tiny bit about religion, tiny bit about economic. Okay, each of those arenas, okay, have rules, roles, expectations in them. The arenas of life both liberate and bind the individual. Now think, okay, in terms of your life, okay, it takes place in these different arenas, okay. Are there parts of these arenas that are very liberational? Okay, but there are also parts of those arenas that are not very liberational at all. Okay, I would hope that you could have a really clear picture, okay, of what society is like. But I know, just like I put the picture up behind me now, that the picture is never clear. Do we have perfect definitions for everything? Do we have, are our microscopes perfect? Are our concepts perfect? Are our theories perfect? Do we have the best data and all that? The answer is no, we don't. Okay, so the best you can do usually is to try to see the pattern, okay, and then move forward from there. We're going to move now into the specific process of socialization. Okay, we're just dealing with family, and now we're going to talk about how do you get culture into folks. Okay, and that's the whole socialization process. And I put together this one from Rugrats and Curtain Climbers to Aged Old Timers, and I use that as the title of this little piece because socialization occurs from the birth until death. Okay, it's not just about when we're young. The core topics I'm going to deal with today are the definitions of socialization, some types of socialization, agents of socialization, the context of socialization, some images that some of you may find useful to remember the socialization concepts. Okay. In terms of a definition, socialization is the process of getting culture into an individual. Now think about it. It's a process, okay? Culture is everything. Okay, culture is all the rules and all the stuff of human beings. Okay, socialization is in the process of getting all those rules and all the meaning of all of that stuff into all of the members of society. The process begins at birth and ends at death. Okay, for oldies like me, okay, I'm already starting to get to think about, Jesus, I got to worry about, final costs and what do I want done with my estate and all that kind of stuff. For most of you, you're way younger than that. Okay, you're probably closer to the birth than the death part of it. But even when you go to a hospital in terms of hospice, etc., okay, you have a whole series of new things to learn in terms of death. Sometimes the process of socialization is informal. The interaction between a parent and a child, for example. And that's the process of socialization that most of you are most familiar with when you hear the term. Okay? But sometimes the process is much more formal. For example, in the university classroom, we've got real specific rules. You got to sign up. You got to get stuff turned in on time. I got a grade. Got to get those grades back to you. Okay? All those grades are supposed to have meaning amongst all of the other possible university things and etc. There's always, in terms of the process, there's always going to be symbols that occur that are important. There's two types of socialization that are probably more important than the others, and I'll start with the one that takes place first in your life and is first important. Primary socialization takes place in primary groups. Now later we'll talk more about groups. Think of a primary group as a face-to-face group. Okay, that there's some degree of intimacy between the individual and the other individuals in the group. Secondary socialization takes place in secondary groups, and secondary groups are much more functional. Okay, rather than working on the emotive end of things, secondary groups work much more likely on the functional end of things, learning the roles to play as a worker, for example. takes place in a secondary group, takes place second in the individual's life, so it's of second importance. Anticipatory socialization occurs in anticipation of a future role. Now this is where things get a little more exciting. Okay. Secondary socialization that takes place in school is also anticipatory socialization. It anticipates that you will be a voter. It anticipates that you will be a worker. It anticipates that you will be part of a larger economic system, and it anticipates that you will be a part of a family. So there's anticipatory parts of certain kinds of roles. And there's resocialization. Resocialization occurs when prior socialization has failed or radical new socialization is required. The two resocializations that are easiest to think about, one would be one that occurs in terms of prison, and the other would be a boot camp style experience. When you join the military, they basically take all the old cultural stuff away from you and recreate you as a new person. Okay, the Army does own you, the Marines do own you, or the Navy does own you. Okay, when you're in a prison situation, okay, the prison situation is supposed to re-socialize the individual so that they're better prepared to be out in the world at large. And what we basically found is that those re-socialization experiences aren't really very re-socializing, and nor are they very effective. In terms of agents, again, we're going to see here some of the roles that we talked about earlier. Parents, grandparents, siblings are members of our family. They are agents of primary socialization. Peers, playmates, classmates, and teammates are also agents of socialization, usually agents of primary socialization because there's a degree of intimacy involved in the relationship. Teachers, preschool teachers, through primary grades, through university profs, okay? And you switch there to secondary socializations. But those teachers and professors are all agents of society that are supposed to prepare the individual in one way or another for performance in that society. Clergy, ministers, priests, nuns, deacons, etc. They're all agents of socialization. So now it kind of moved over into that arena of the religious section, okay, but the religious section is a whole series of socialization that occurs, okay, in religion and each of the other arenas as well. Okay. Emerging as more important than was true in the past as an agent of socialization is the media. TV, movies, videos, lyrics, books, print material. Okay. Okay. The media, I would argue, okay, has become as important or more important than any other agent in the socialization of persons. Think of changes in terms of technology, okay, the amount of information that's available to you through the different media sources that you have access to, and how that media socializes you, both in positive kinds of ways and maybe not such positive kinds of ways. Okay, here's an image of a father reading to his son. Okay, that's a socialization experience that's going on. Some context. The ones that are most common are at home, at school, at church, and at work. Okay, so socialization takes place in each of those arenas, probably more at home than at school. Probably a little more at school than at church, but for some, school and church are mixed up. Okay, and then when we get a little older, probably into our teens at least, then we begin to interact with the world of work, and socialization takes place there. Think of yourself as a new employee in any of the jobs that you've ever had. One of the things that you probably did was to ask your coworkers, how are things really done around here now that I've read the employee manual? Whatever it may say may not necessarily be reflective of what goes on. So we've got the home, we've got the apple at the school, and we've got the church on the hill, and we've got individuals in a variety of situations in work roles. Okay. As we emerge into a more and more globalized world, groups such as McDonald's, okay, which is a major corporation, across the international scene, or Nike or Microsoft, okay, as examples, become important socializers. Okay. They teach the model of efficiency and effectiveness. Okay. And they go all the way to the point of having universities. Okay. You have McDonald University, where they train their upper level management personnel. Okay. Others are adopting the same kind of model. So images for socialization. Here's one that comes out of the women's liberation movement, but the women's liberation movement used this one retroactively to World War II. Okay, this is a we can do it in terms of building B-52s and B-51s for World War II. You have the socialization process of formal education. You have the high touch in of a father and a son in terms of touching hands and going for a walk and exploring the world. Okay. Here's an image of the peace sign and many of the women that were really important in terms of the suffrage movement for women and then movement in terms of modern feminism. Okay. Later on in the class we'll talk about some of these important women in terms of their roles. In summary, today I discussed socialization definitions, types of socialization, agents of socialization, socialization context, images of socialization, and prior to that, I discussed life's arenas, the tools of the trade, definitions of sociology. Okay. I'm a very image-orientated person, so I always can surround myself with these because they tend to really help me know and understand things. Thank you all. If there are any questions, make sure that you get back to me vis-a-vis email or through another form if you need to use another form, but I really prefer email so we both have records of what those questions are. Okay, in terms of the credits, the images are all from Google Images, and the slide design was per Jim Pfaff's class notes that I took in our former ILC class of 103. Okay, that's it for our material today. Thanks you all for being with me along for the ride.